Zero RB, Hyperfragile RB, extreme drafting strategies. What should I do? Can't I just draft the best players? No, you can't. You're bad at it. But don't worry, that's why I'm here, because today I'm going to tell you the 3 data-proven ways to win $2 million playing best ball. Let's do it. Since the dawn of time, fantasy football players have debated drafting strategies. And with 2 million up top this year on Underdog and 1 million going to second, the debates around the best strategies are only going to intensify. In a perfect world, we'd just draft the best players and not worry about structure. Last year, if you took Jonathan Taylor, Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, Mark Andrews, your structure wouldn't have mattered. Here's the thing though, we are collectively really bad at drafting the best players. Go ahead, look back at any of your drafts. They are littered with busts and misses. On top of that, in best ball tournaments, we don't have the luxury of cleaning up our draft mistakes with a waiver wire. We are stuck with the team we drafted, and oh, by the way, you have to beat out hundreds of thousands of teams. Structural strategies allow us to essentially plan ahead and provides us with guardrails to not only withstand the chaos of an NFL season, but to thrive from it. The goal with these strategies isn't to get caught up with what they're called. Grown men will literally argue online all day whether it's called modified zero RB or hero RB instead of going to therapy. But to actually understand what these draft strategies accomplish, they provide a framework that you can bend within your drafts depending on where you're picking and what your opponents are doing. But as the saying goes, before you can break the rules, you need to learn the rules. And in the short history of best ball tournaments, 3 dominant strategies have emerged. First up, we have what we will call anchor running back. And for our purposes, we'll define this as taking your first running back within the first 2 rounds and not taking your second running back until after round 5. Last year, Connor O'Driscoll won $100,000 in FFPC's best ball tournament with a team he anchored with Dalvin Cook and didn't take his next running back until the 8th round. Similarly, Liam Murphy won $1 million on Underdog with a double anchor RB team where he took Jonathan Taylor and Aaron Jones with his first 2 picks and then waited all the way until the 8th round to take his 3rd running back. The reason why the anchor RB strategy works is because it gives drafters access to the running backs who truly have a chance at a legendary season and massive playoff upside, while also loading up on wide receiver firepower in rounds 3 through 5. This is a key point because wide receivers in this range outproduce running backs year over year. On Underdog, we only have to fill 2 running back spots each week, and we can start up to 4 wide receivers thanks to 3 starting wide receivers plus a flex spot. Because wide receivers have such a higher ceiling on a weekly basis, can I remind you of Jamar Chase's week 17 last year? Our goal should be to fill our flex with a wide receiver. Thanks to Michael Dubner and RotoViz, we can actually look at the data from last year and see that teams who took an anchor running back and then finished their roster with no more than 5 to 6 running backs advanced to the playoffs at a rate of 20%. That's more than any other structural draft strategy we're going to discuss today. One of the key revelations with this data is the diminishing returns of taking too many additional running backs with your anchor running back. As for double anchor RB, you can see here that it appears it actually outperformed single anchor RB in 2021, but wait, there's reason to be skeptical about that. In 2021, the round 2 running backs actually crushed the round 1 running backs. So if you took, say, Najee Harris in the 2nd round, you outperformed the double anchor RB teams. I know this is getting slightly confusing, but there is a very clear takeaway here, and it's that single anchor running back is a dominant strategy, and it doesn't matter whether you take that running back in round 1 or in round 2. The TLDR is this: anchoring your team with a bell cow running back and then piecing together your running back 2 production much later in the draft is a dominant winning strategy on Underdog. Best Ball Mania 3 is now open on Underdog. We have a $2 million top prize, $1 million to second. And if you've never played on Underdog before, you can get a $100 deposit match with promo code Pete. That means you deposit $100, you get $100, aka 4 free tickets in Best Ball Mania and your chance to ship the $2 million. Just don't snipe me, bro. Our second profitable drafting strategy is the scary. The terrifying 0 RB, which means you never take a running back ever. You simply get zeros at the position all year. Well, that's at least what Twitter would lead you to believe. We'll more reasonably define it as not taking a running back until after round 5. I've had true 0 RB teams finish in the top 10 of underdog tournaments in both 2020 and 2021, including this team I drafted with Eric Beimfor last year that finished in 8th place in Best Ball Mania 2 for $25,000. We didn't take our first running back until round 8.
Mostert, I think, is a guy that fits this build well as far as just giving us touches right out of the gate.
Narrator, he didn't get us off to a fast start. In fact, Raheem Mostert played 3 quarters the entire season, which means we essentially didn't draft our first running back until round 10 with James Conner. 0 RB works because it allows you to load up on pass catching firepower early. The team I drafted with Eric, we started with Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, Kyle Pitts, and Jamar Chase. And that wide receiver firepower carried us until the chaos of the season allowed some of our running backs to emerge. Sony Michel and Rashad Penny were 2 of our later round picks, and they didn't do hardly anything for the entire season, but delivered some massive performances in the fantasy playoffs that supercharged our team that was already loaded with great wide receivers. The reason 0 RB works is the same reason it makes people so scared. It terrifies people to look at a roster with so much uncertainty. Starting running backs make us feel all warm and fuzzy inside because it's theoretically easy to project their volume on paper. But that's not how things often go with the running back position. Can I remind you of Mike Davis? Oh, you don't remember him? Yeah, he was the projected starting running back for the Falcons last year. What's really funny is that despite being the most talked about drafting strategy, 0 RB is still the least utilized of all of these structures we're discussing today. 0 RB haters, of which there are many, will say, you can't do 0 RB, you'll take too many zeros at the position, you won't make the playoffs. Guess what? That's a valid concern, though a misguided one for tournaments with top-heavy prizes where we're trying to win $2 million. You can see in the data that 0 RB teams actually advance to the playoffs less than the baseline expected amount. But our goal isn't to just make the playoffs or play for the friendliest loss or the prettiest Twitter screenshot. Our goal is to get first place, and to do that, we need to beat over 350,000 other teams. Yeah, that's a shit ton. And guess what? 0 running back last year had the highest advancement rate to the finals than any other drafting strategy. Let me be clear, because the data doesn't lie. A lot of your 0 RB teams won't work. But when it does hit, it hits in such a massive way that you have juggernaut teams that can truly compete for $2 million. The TLDR for 0 RB is simple. The running back position is chaotic, whether because of injuries, coaching decisions, performance. The deck is constantly shuffling. If we can force ourselves to be uncomfortable when we draft, AKA Twitter's not gonna like the screenshot of your team.
You're strong on receiver, you're weak at running back.
We can actively benefit from this running back chaos when we do land on the correct combination of late round running backs. By the way, I'm going to be releasing multiple best ball strategy videos over the coming weeks and months, so subscribe to the channel and get notified when I drop a new video. All right, our third profitable structural drafting strategy is Hyperfragile. And no, I'm not just talking about Raheem Mostert. Hyperfragile is basically the inverse of 0 running back. Instead of drafting a high quantity of running backs in the later rounds like we do with 0 RB, you draft a limited amount of high quality running backs in the early rounds. We'll define Hyperfragile as taking 3 running backs before round 6, but, and this is a very key part, taking no more than 4 total. So after you take those 3 in the first 6 rounds, only 1 more on top of that. Justin Herzig won the inaugural Best Ball Mania in 2020 with a Hyperfragile team where he took Alvin Kamara, Chris Carson, and David Montgomery with 3 of his early picks, and then only added 1 other running back later in the draft in Tony Pollard. To make up for his low quality wide receivers, he made up for it in quantity, drafting 9 total wide receivers. The reason Hyperfragile works is similar to why anchor running back strategy works. It gives you access to the 1, 2, hopefully 3 running backs who have legendary seasons, while freeing up your other roster spots to get an elite quarterback or elite tight end, and of course a high quantity of wide receivers. When those early running backs hit, then your team has a massive ceiling. The key though to making Hyperfragile work is not to draft more than 4 running backs. You must draft as if you are right. And with Hyperfragile, that means that you hit on those first 3 picks, which means any subsequent running backs would rarely sniff your starting lineup anyways. You don't want to waste roster spots on a position you've already covered. It would be like buying an expensive pair of binoculars after buying a telescope. I don't know. The analogy seemed good. It just, there's diminishing returns. While structurally sound, Hyperfragile didn't work as well in 2021 as it did in 2020. Which goes to show there isn't a silver bullet strategy to win within any given year, but rather a basket of strategies that can take advantage of whatever specific player performances happen within a given year. Similar to Zero RB, there's a reason it's called Hyperfragile. Its success is going to be dependent on a year in which multiple early running backs have legendary seasons. If that happens, Hyperfragile can become a dominant strategy similar to what it was in 2020. The TLDR on Hyperfragile is really, really simple. Draft running backs early and often, but not a lot of them. Our final strategy to discuss is robust running back. I'm just kidding. Robust RB is truly one of the dumbest strategies ever concocted. Let's all take a moment of silence to both thank and commiserate with the 6% of the field who thought it was a good idea to draft 4 running backs before round 7 and got subsequently massacred. Let's all take a moment of silence. Thank you for your service. That's a lot of red. Just say no to robust running back. Unless you're in a draft with me, in which case, pop those testosterone pills and load up, baby.
Do not take Big T if you plan to play a wide receiver in the flex.
We can now zoom out and look at all 3 of these structural draft strategies and come up with some pretty clear takeaways. Anchor running back is by far the best strategy for finishing top 2 in your individual league and advancing to the playoffs. Zero RB was less successful in advancing to the playoffs, but those teams that did get through advanced to the semis and the finals at a higher rate than any other of these strategies. Hyperfragile struggled in 2021, but the fundamental underpinnings of the strategy remain very strong. Here's another way to see how these strategies performed, and that's just their percentage over the baseline expectation. We've mainly focused on Underdog's Best Ball Mania 2 in this video, and that's simply because we don't have multiple years with the same best ball structure, which means we can't get a true apples to apples comparison. If you are wondering about more macro year-over-year trends and worried about a small sample size in 2021, we can look at the teams that finished in the top 2% of best ball 10s. We have data there that goes all the way back to 2017, and lo and behold, it's a very, very similar pattern, with Anchor RB serving as a dominant structure and Zero RB right up there with it. Ultimately, all of these extreme and radical running back strategies have similar principles, just different applications. You don't have to make a predetermined decision to do one of these strategies. You can see how your draft is going and then pick accordingly. Put it another way, what you do early on in your drafts dictates the optimal way to approach the rest of your draft. Did a running back fall to you late in the second round that you didn't think was going to be there? Well, maybe you do a Hyperfragile draft. Is everyone gobbling up running backs and the best players available or wide receivers and tight ends? Well, then maybe you go with a Zero RB strategy. But no matter what, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable with your running backs. Either the quality of them in zero running back builds or the quantity of them in Hyperfragile and Anchor builds. If there's one single constant in the data year after year, it's that the running back position is a chaotic, volatile position. We must draft our rosters in a way that acknowledges that chaos and can also benefit from it. Otherwise, we'll have no chance to win $2 million on Underdog this year. Big thanks to RotoViz's Michael Dubner for helping me research and pull together charts for this video. You can find his great work over at RotoViz, including some longer pieces on best ball strategy. I'll drop a link to his author page down below. I'll have more best ball videos to come, but in the meantime, I recommend hopping in the Deposit Kingdom Discord. We have a great best ball channel in there where you can converse with fellow best ball sickos. All right, you may now go back to arguing about whether it's called Hero RB or Superhero RB or Modified Zero RB or Anchor RB.